Well, it all goes back to what's the story you want to tell,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Okay.
Right. I mean, at some point, I don't care about this one transaction. At some point, I'm going to want to know what happened, right? At the end of the year, what happened with my company? Where did all my money go? Where did all my income come from? What happened? And that's the reporting piece. And that's what the accounts are set up for. They're to answer those questions. So either you're answering a question that you care about or you're answering a question that you don't care about. And those accounts can change, right? At some point I decided, I don't need to see in a report how much I spend on water and how much I spend on electricity. Let me just dump those into utilities. Right? It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's good enough. And that's just a choice. So yeah, don't get hung up too much on well, this is what the Treasury statement says. Well, that's because somebody decided to do it that way.
Welcome to ActivistMMT, a podcast about nonviolent MMT direct activism, introducing modern monetary theory to the world and conversations about learning MMT together. I'm your host, Jeff Epstein. Today is part 2 of my 2-part conversation with 7th year MMT activist Bill Peeples. Bill and I continue talking about various subjects such as accounting, China, the life cycle of a government's money, and how human decisions are never natural or scientific. A full introduction can be found before part 1, but for now, let's get right back to our conversation.
That's a whole different discussion.
Yeah, no. It's just I was surprised to hear you say credit union when almost 100% of the time in MMT discussions you hear banks.
Yeah, just it's another word for bank. Just
okay.
Just treat it as a bank. Yeah,
fair enough. You said something. I'm just going to ask something specific that I saw you mention recently, and I thought it was insightful, and I'm sure you'll remember me, acknowledging this on Facebook. Someone was asking. I think it was something like, what if China dumps our debt? And I don't remember the exact context, but the way that you answered was government creates money, government destroys that same money. Whatever happens between those 2 points, all that we're talking about is changing of ownership of that same money.
Right.
It's a very concise way of saying it. That covers a lot of topics. That covers China. That covers, in particular, like, China dumps its debt. Well, what are they going to do? They'll change ownership. Will they purchase stuff? Or, there's only so many things that they can do, but nothing can destroy that money except for the creator of that money. So I don't know if you can elaborate on that concept.
Well, I mean, I think you pretty much said it, right? So, the issuer of any instrument, so whether it be again, the U.S. dollar, or it be a movie ticket or an arcade token or whatever it is. Once that thing is issued, the issuer holds the liability, and whoever gets that instrument holds the asset. And once, until that asset is rejoined with its issuer, both of those things continue to exist. And once the asset's back in the hand of the issuer, it ceases to exist, right? Because the asset and the liability offset each other, and so they no longer exist. So in between there, yeah, any of us can pass those things around, right? So I can theoretically go buy a movie ticket and say, hey Jeff, I bought this ticket, I can't go, it's sold out. Do you have an interest in going? And I can elect to trade that to you for whatever we decide the value is, whether it be a beer or some amount of dollars, or just maybe a favor at some point in the future, whatever the case is, right? So that instrument can change hands. You can call it barter if you want. You can call it spending if you want, but it can change hands any number of times. And somebody's assets go up and somebody's assets go down when that happens, and at least in nominal terms. And that continues to, dollars out in the wild continue to change hands until they go back to the creator, right?
Mhm. And why don't you could you hook that into like China, for instance, the common China, dumping their debt or whatever it is with that.
Yeah, and this is a common, I guess, I don't know if it's a fear thing, or just a misunderstanding of, well, China has all this leverage, right? Well, so what is it that China has? So and how did they get it? So at some point, China said, "Hey, why don't we give you our productive output?" And this is something that Warren talks about in the Seven Deadly Innocent Frauds. Is they're giving us real stuff, right? So whatever their output is from their real resources, their labor, their factories, and all that, they're giving us real stuff, which increases our net worth in real terms, aside from the nominal pieces. But if I have some amount of stuff and somebody gives me more stuff, I now have more stuff. It's pretty straightforward. So they give us their productive output that increases our wealth in real terms, at least temporarily. Some of it's disposable, but whatever the case may be, it's something that we decided was valuable that we didn't have to create using our resources.
Mhm.
In exchange, they get whatever we agreed the price was. So people talk about, well, we got this trade imbalance. Well, that's perfectly balanced. We said, yeah, we want that. We're willing to pay. They said, well, we'll
Yeah, yeah.
give it to you and we're willing to take this much. And that's balanced, right? We come to a decision of what the right price is. So they get dollars, we get stuff. Both sides are happy. Now that they have dollars, they can, just like any other currency user, they can use them, they can spend them, they can trade them to somebody else for something else, or they can just hang on to them. And they like to hang on to at least a good number of them because we let them buy treasury securities that pay some interest. That's how they elect to hang on to them. And that's the debt, right? The debt to China is however many treasury securities that they own. So they take the dollars out of their checking account, they put it into their treasury securities account, and now instead of holding dollars, they're holding bonds. Okay. Well, what happens if they cash them in, right? Well, they take their dollars out of their treasury securities account, and they put it into their checking account, and now they're holding dollars. Okay, they cashed them in. So what? So it's the opposite of the transaction they did the first time.
Hmm.
And if they decide they don't want to hold dollars, they can go sell them on the foreign exchange market, or they can buy stuff with them. But they got to have somebody else on the opposite end that wants to take that trade at whatever that price is.
Yeah, the phrase "dumping your debt" it's just a scaremongering phrase. People just assume that it's bad without thinking what it actually means.
Well, yeah, because they think
Like,
that,
what are they going to do? Light the dollars on fire?
yeah, I mean, are they, well, I think the thought is, well, if they sell all their bonds at one time, the value of the dollar goes down. Well, one, they can't sell them all at one time. Maybe they can. It's probably not very likely.
And it's
Um,
certainly within our power to, or the government's power to delay them or
well, I mean, if it's a,
charge them something.
if
Or
they're reselling a bond on the retail market, they've got to have somebody else that wants to buy it, right? So the number of bonds being offered and demanded are still equal. Somebody, they can't just dump it out there.
They can't create or destroy bonds either.
Yeah,
So bonds are money.
yeah. I mean, like you said, they could take dollar bills and set them on fire, but that doesn't hurt us. Um, so yeah, so I mean, it's only the issuer can redeem that instrument, right? So and anything that happens in between those two endpoints, like we said, is just a change of ownership. So they have to have a willing trade partner on the other side that says, "Oh, you don't want to hold those bonds? Well, I'll take them. Here's the price."
Right. Yeah, it's money that makes money.
And
Sure,
if
of
all
course.
of a sudden there's a lot more for sale than what people want, that price goes down, which means China's net worth in terms of dollars also goes down, right? So it's not necessarily a good position for them either, to dump them to try to sell them all.
Right.
So yeah, it's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. It, it's not a legitimate argument.
Do you happen to be familiar at all with the Chinese economy as far as their currency is connected to the dollar, but they have so much reserves in bonds or whatever it is in order to manage their economy?
Yeah, just a little bit. I don't know a lot about the Chinese economy. I know that they do operate sort of on a fixed exchange rate regime, but that they certainly have some tools available to manage that to an extent. So, but beyond that, I'm not really the expert on that piece.
Yeah, yeah, I that is something that I want to understand better as well. Um, but I do just to the basic point that they are. I don't believe it's a rigid exchange rate. I believe there's some flexibility
I mean,
within it.
it's rigid when they want it to be, you know, um,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But there's that's how fixed exchange work. Is we're going to fix the rate at this until we don't want it to be that. And it's kind of what happened with Bretton Woods, right? And we decided, we don't want to exchange the dollar for gold internationally at that price, so we're just going to not do it anymore.
Right. There was a really good quote on superstructure. Uh, Will Beeman, I believe, in one of the earlier episodes, said in fact, I'll say the episode, which was "The Virus is the Virus." He said, August 1971 is not when money changed from being a commodity to fiat. It's just when our ideology stopped pretending it was ever a commodity to begin with.
Yeah,
And
that's a good way to put it.
what he's saying, how I understand it, is that so people say, well, we used to be connected to gold, and gold is out of people's hands. It's out of human control. Yeah, that's right. But our choice to hook our money to it is not out of human control. The
Right,
gold standard is not out of human control, and that's evidenced by the fact that we went off of it, yeah, in both world wars and in 1971.
right.
Yeah, so
And domestically, back in what 1933, I guess we stopped exchanging.
I believe internally,
Yeah,
as I
yeah,
understand it.
just domestically. So
Right.
we kept the international arrangement as long as it was beneficial and didn't really affect us. And then once we decided that maybe it's not convenient, then we abandoned it. Right. So, so it was a fixed thing, but kinda right. We had the option as a policy choice to change it. Um,
So China has decided to somehow be hooked their currency to hook to our currency, fixed to our currency to some extent. And they choose to compensate for that by having tons of US treasuries, bonds,
yeah, they can
reserve.
protect that rate if they have enough foreign reserves, right? So it doesn't affect their fiscal space as much as it might affect somebody that doesn't have a lot of foreign reserves on hand.
They have a lot of stuff to export. So actually, what, this is interesting because I'm starting to get more into, I'm not starting to get, I'm really aggressively trying to, I spent my first 2.5 years. February 2018 is when I discovered MMT. And, you go through however long, like the first thing is like, logic. It's just very logical.
Yeah.
It's just very obvious, and
Almost too obvious, right? I mean, that's the problem I had with it, is it made too much sense. So how could it be right?
nothing
And
is wrong.
and
Wait, nothing is wrong. So doesn't that mean that something is wrong? It's like
yeah,
what to
well,
expect when you're expecting.
if I
My
mean,
favorite question from the book, what to expect when you're expecting that massive 5,000 page book that I'm, my favorite question in the entire book is nothing's wrong. Could something be wrong?
right? I mean, but yeah, because why do we not? If it's this easy, how come no, how come we don't all know this? Right?
Mhm.
That was my thought. If it was this easy, surely we would everybody would just know. I mean, how do we not know? And that's what baffled me. So yeah, so it took me a little while to get my head around that piece. But
This is not supposed to be understandable to average people. This has to be more complicated than I can understand.
yeah, exactly.
And and
Something.
and also, it is not possible for us to not be abused. We have to be abused in some way. We have to suffer in some way. That's what the economy is.
Right.
If I need something good, then I have to suffer for in order to get it. That's the whole taxpayer myth.
Yeah.
In order to get healthcare, I have to be taxed so that I go bankrupt. I mean, something like that. Basically, I have to punch myself in the face in order to get healthcare.
Yeah. Well, me
It,
being not working as healthcare. Yeah, I definitely identify with that.
but it's like, so the economy or society or whatever is all about suffering. And so MMT introduces the concept, the idea that it is possible to not suffer.
Well,
It is
to
possible for society to not suffer, but even more than that, it is possible to actually be treated better than just not suffering. It's actually possible to be treated well. And
well
that's just,
to an extent, right? So it all, and it all goes back to our real resources, our real capabilities. So the question is, do we have the capability for the number of people we have and the resources and productive capacity that we have for everybody to have what they need? And I think the answer is right now, and in our case, is obviously yes. Now, if we lived in the middle of a desert, that answer might change, MMT or not, right? So you do have to have the underlying resources. You do have to have the underlying abilities, the technology, the know-how, right? So it's not just as simple as we can make the money. Well, yeah, but the money has to buy something, right? There's got to be the resources. So and I tell a lot of people, it's like, well, what does affordability mean, right? We can't afford Medicare for all. Okay, well, what does affordability mean? So if I ask you right now, so let's say the stores are closed, you're at home, you want to make a sandwich. How do you know if you can afford to make a sandwich? You walk in, if you got bread, you got some ham, you got some cheese, you can afford it. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with your bank account.
uh,
You either have the stuff or you don't have the stuff.
and your paying for it is deciding to do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's just a choice, right? But it's already been done. So today, if I want to make a sandwich right now, can I afford it? I don't know. I'd have to go look, but I think I can. So it's whatever's in the fridge right now. Right.
So being able to afford it is, do I have the stuff in my fridge? Do I have bread and meat and
Yeah,
whatever?
in real terms, right?
And paying for it is deciding to walk to your kitchen and do it.
Yeah,
Actually, it's the decision to walk to your kitchen to do it. That's the paying for it, like the analogy
that's
to pay
that's the
for it.
labor cost, right? For right now, right? Assuming I already have the materials.
And it's like once you start doing it, it's like that is the payment is already the money has already made its way into the economy and now it's happening.
Yeah,
Boy, that is a stretch, but that works.
yeah. I mean, but it's easy to understand, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. If I have the stuff, I can do it, right? I mean, that's the bottom line.
But what if you make too many decisions? Won't there be inflation?
Yeah. Well, there might be, right? I don't know.
You have the unlimited capacity to make decisions,
At some
but we
point,
only have so many things and time to do in the day. Only so much food in our fridge. We can only make so many
So I'm
decisions.
pretty sure I can make one sandwich, but if like 20 people, 20 of my closest friends come by, I don't know if I can make 20 sandwiches or not. We may all get a fourth of a sandwich. I don't know, right?
And that is
We have,
deciding to distribute your resources evenly.
yeah,
Even if you have just, you know, uh, one piece of bread and 20 people, you can divide that piece of bread into 20 pieces. You could.
you
And
could.
everyone will suffer, everyone will not be too pleased, but that is the best you can do in that moment.
Or I can just keep it to myself, right? I mean,
Or
that's
you can be unequal about it.
right.
Or you can have
But
inequality.
but those are
Absolutely.
yeah, and those are all policy choices. So so a lot of people, and I don't want to get too ethereal on this, too philosophical, but
You're not too philosophical about deli meat.
yeah, well, no, just in general about choices, right? So we have the way society works right now. We have the way our economy works right now. We have the way our tax system and our elections and right there's the way things are at this moment. You can look around, you can see kind of how things are. How things are divided up, what inequality looks like, how many people we have homeless on the streets. We can see that. That's how they are now. And and I think a lot of people start with the idea that okay, well this is the natural state,
Right.
and then anything else we do is somehow unnatural.
Right.
So if we now redefine how we divide stuff up, well that's going against the natural state. But this is not the natural state. This is a state that we chose at some point. We went down a path and we ended up here. It didn't. This is not natural.
But
None of this is natural.
for those in power, they have a stability, and that is not you might not call it natural, but we are currently, you and I are not out sleeping out on the street or desperate for our next piece of bread, so we have stability. So we have to, it is the fear of there's homeless people on the street, but if we do something for them, then I'm going to have less. And I'm already struggling, in my head, I'm already struggling because
Right.
I'm only 100,000-aire. I don't have I'm not a millionaire. So I'm struggling.
Right.
So if
Exactly.
I have to,
Everybody's struggling, right?
right, and millionaires are struggling because they're not 100 millionaires. So if I help them, and the homeless people on the street, there's thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them. Poverty, how many kids are in poverty? So it's like, it is the feeling of, it is the feeling for a privileged person to look at like homeless people or to look at disadvantaged people, and that if they help them, they're going to be attacked by, lower species people, basically. That in order to help them, they have to be, even if they're a millionaire, they can't help the huge population of those who are suffering out there. And the only one that can do that without having to chop itself into pieces is the issuer of the currency.
I mean, Bezos could do a lot, right? But we shouldn't give him that much power or that much credit, right?
Right.
There's
Yeah.
there's no reason, like Stephanie says, money doesn't grow on rich people. There's no reason that whether we help this person or not is dependent on how much we can extract from the rich guys, right? It's just crazy. But that's what we're doing.
Right.
So we think there's a fixed pie, and if one guy's got too much pie, we have to take theirs to get it to somebody else. But let's just make another pie. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? We've got the stuff. Let's make another pie. Then if we want to worry about whether he's got too much, we'll handle that separately. That's a different
Right.
issue. Um,
Right.
but
Okay. So what I was saying before, when you start off with MMT, and at first it's just very logical, it just makes sense, and you struggle with, well, why does this make sense? I'm too average for something to make sense. It's only for important, only economics is for important people. So clearly, if I understand it, it has to be wrong. But so at first, it's just logical, and so you want to, like I said before, like you learn piano for 2 weeks, and then you turn around and you want to teach a second grader piano, and you're a genius to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. You could be a quote unquote teacher to a second grader for at least a little while in that respect with like piano. But with you get excited about the logic stuff, that I learned 5 minutes and I wanted to turn around and share it with someone that only knew 2 minutes. But then they hit you with stuff that you are absolutely not prepared to handle. And then 6 months into my journey, I finally read. I'm just guessing. That's sort of just a feeling. I finally read Stephanie Kelton's 1998 paper. Can taxes and bonds finance government spending?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I got introduced to accounting as well. And at first I was extremely intimidated. So then there's a depth that you suddenly realize that this is the tip of an iceberg. But then you get sort of a domestic sort of understanding of MMT. I think like after a year or a year and a half or whatever, like I think you get a general domestic economy understanding of MMT. And now I'm at the stage where I pretty much understand the basics of developing nations and Fidel's work, just generally speaking. I can kind of say it in a basic way. But then I'm at the stage now where I'm trying to hook those two things together. And I think John Harvey's work is a significant amount of that,
Oh yeah.
where exchange rates. And I don't know, I'll pretend you don't know and you'll tell me that, whatever. But, trading of goods is only a very small part of that. I mean, that's like 1 to 8% of what foreign exchange is. And so to an extent, exchanging of goods is very important because obviously governments have to provision themselves with real stuff.
Right.
But that's only a very small part of the puzzle, because trading of money is 90 to 98.5 of what actually happens between countries. And so that can swamp the effects of the trading of goods, because Fidel says that developing countries have to gain control of their own currency, and they have to be able to do full employment so that they can develop as much as possible to work towards not having to depend on other countries to import stuff, food, oil, because then that other country can use it as a weapon
Right.
very easily. But there's an additional part, which is you have to protect yourself from foreign interference in your currency. Because if they get a stranglehold on like an industry, or if they trick you into selling your water plant, whatever you call it, water industry, then they have control over you regardless of your provisioning. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
But that's where I am right now, is taking my domestic understanding and then taking Fidel's and then trying to hook these two together. And I think that this is where John Harvey's work is going to come in, but I'm struggling to complete that picture. It's pretty complicated.
Yeah, I've got John's book on my list. I haven't gotten to it yet. So the whole foreign exchange market is not something that I spent a lot of time with to this point.
I will tell you, the inside cover, I could do an entire like 6-hour interview with John just on the inside cover of his book. So so the inside cover, it's basically trading of goods is not what matters. What matters is trading of currency, trading of money.
Well,
And
in
then,
some respects, right? So I mean, the goods matter to real consumption and what you need as a country to provision your
yes,
population, right? So that is technically the important part from a survivability standpoint.
yes,
But
in a context that Fidel discusses, and I'm struggling to distinguish between these two. But yes, of course, it all boils down to real stuff and provisioning your government and people in real terms. But setting that aside for a moment, 98% of what happens between two different countries is trading of money. So I highly recommend the book. Chapter 1, just the introduction, I probably spent a month and a half on. Just a 5-page section, I actually was like, it's nowhere near done. It's an introduction of post-Keynesian, which is really an introduction of mainstream versus post-Keynesian. And I spent I just read that thing probably 15 times and just started writing. And the chapter 2, which is on the mainstream view, was such a chore, so very difficult. Really, really was hard.
Well, I think I saw some postings that you did on that. It looked like it was pretty well covered, so I didn't chime in,
Okay.
but
Um, so yeah, obviously I'm all over the place and struggling to get my head around it, but I know that that's kind of the direction where I need to go now. So anyway, sorry.
no problem. There's a lot, certainly lots of areas that I'm deficient in as well, and could continue to seek education on. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, John's a great guy. Lots of good information. Of course, I love his cowboy alter ego. But but yeah, that one's on my list. Just haven't gotten there yet. Right now, I'm reading. Let's give a shout out to Stephen Hale. Economics for Sustainable Prosperity
Mm,
is what's currently sitting next to me.
cool. Where are you in the book?
I am just at the beginning, so I haven't made it very far. But so far, so good. I'm on chapter 2.
And that's the mainstream chapter. That's where I'm I've read chapters 1 and 2.
So yeah, looking forward to finishing that one. And I'm kind of in the middle of Galbraith's Predator State book, which
Hmm.
is interesting, but it's a little harder read. So I kind of go back to that one every now and then and read another chapter and then move away from it for a while.
Hard for a
But
particular reason.
what that's just it's a little drier, a little more philosophical. It's a good book. Don't get me wrong. I would still recommend taking a look at it. It's just a little bit different than some of the other, I guess, some of the other things that I'm looking at. So,
Okay. Okay. So where else are you? Or what other books or whatever has impacted you?
I mean, so most of it has been more papers and lectures and blogs, and of course, Bill Mitchell's blog, the New Economic Perspectives blog I've mentioned before, and any number of papers by Rowan Gray and Nathan Tankus and
Hmm.
Stephanie, of course, and Randy, and the whole gang. I consume pretty much anything I can get my hands on. Uh,
Are there any particular recommendations you would have for maybe people at the beginning?
really, I mean, just going through I think the money and banking series on NEP is very important to understand. Um,
Is
so
that a draft of Time Moyne's textbook?
yes, yeah, yeah, that's basically his textbooks. Which he may, if you contact him, he may send you a PDF copy of, if you'd rather have the textbook version.
Right.
I'm not making any commitments on his behalf. He may not, but something to consider.
Okay.
Um, the Godly Lavoie book was fantastic. Just kind of understanding the stock flow consistent modeling and how those matrices are set up.
Say the name
Um,
of that one again. Godly, and what's the name of that?
Wayne Godley and Mark Lavoie. I think it's called macroeconomics. Let me see if I can find it for you real quick. Monetary economics, an integrated approach to credit, money, income, production, and wealth. And as a programmer, you might be interested. There are some models already set up out there that you can run to reproduce the graphs in the book, and you can play with some of the variables and see what kind of different results you get and stuff. So that's kind of
Hmm.
fun.
And that's a textbook, right?
It is.
Okay. You're reminding me of just the models that you can play with. Steve Keen. I know that that his models, his programming models, it has convinced him of some major part of MMT recently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't looked at his modeling stuff, and I haven't read much of Keen's work. I've read, you know, uh, some tweets, some posts, seen some interviews, maybe a paper or two, but not a whole lot of his stuff. I do like Steve, although I've got minor. I think we've MMT has some minor disagreements with him on certain things, but nothing to get too excited about.
It's related to foreign exchange, as I understand it.
Yeah, primarily.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think he's a fan of Warren's suggestion that imports are a benefit, but
Yeah. It's something related to that.
yeah,
Um, yeah, Debunking Economics, his book, is one of the next ones that I'm going to be reading. Steve Keen's.
yeah. There's no shortage, right? There's plenty of materials out there. So
Yeah.
anybody that hasn't read it that's listening, absolutely read the Deficit Myth, Stephanie Kelton, Seven
Oh
Deadly
yeah.
Innocent Frauds by Warren Mosler. I think those are, are two excellent starting points for certainly for the novice and even for those of you that have been around MMT for a while. If you haven't read those, highly recommended.
Okay. Well, one more topic, if I may, and that would be, what is your familiarity or whatever, like your understanding of mainstream? I am just starting to get into that, like to really understand what their assumptions. And John Harvey's actually been my gateway for that. A 5-page section in his introduction to his foreign exchange book, and then a chapter, a 22-page chapter in his Contending Perspectives book, which he did an interview on with MMT podcast, which was great. So I'm wondering of your understanding of mainstream in service of being a contrast to better understand what's wrong with it. Basically, why MMT is right.
Yeah, and I don't really have a lot of background there. Again, my background is in engineering. Economics wasn't even required as part of that degree plan.
Mm,
So prior to getting involved here, I had an economics class in senior year of high school.
okay.
That was pretty basic, and then my view of mainstream was what the media says, what the politicians say. So I know that's different than what the academics say in a lot of cases, but at the same time, they haven't spent a lot of time correcting the media and the politicians. So I think to a certain extent they're culpable in a lot of the mythology that's out there. They like to say MMT doesn't bring anything new. It's like, well, then why doesn't the population? Why don't they know this stuff, right? So if it's not anything new. So my experience with mainstream is just in limited conversations with exchanging ideas with people, but I haven't spent a lot of time studying it. I did hear John Harvey's recent. He was on the MMT podcast. Christian Riley and Patricia Pino talking about the contending perspectives.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
very good episode, especially.
haven't read the book yet. Also on my list, but
Mhm.
again, that list is getting longer by the minute.
Yeah.
so uh, so yeah, I see the responses to the criticisms and those kinds of things. I see what the critics are writing, which in most cases are straw man arguments from what I've seen over the past few years. So,
Mhm.
but that's about it.
Okay. Um, okay. Well, is there any closing thoughts or any recommendations or anything else that you wanted to say?
Nothing in particular. Although we talked about accounting a little bit, there was something that I had meant to say on the accounting front.
Sure.
Um, so once again, I've had some experience doing accounting for my own businesses. At one point, I had a couple of different stores, but they all rolled up under the same company. But I had a set of books for one store, I had a set of books for the other store. When I went to do my taxes, I combined those two to get overall numbers, right? My overall profit and loss. And I think a lot of people, kind of like what we were talking about in terms of policy, just because of where we are doesn't make this the natural state. That's kind of true with the accounting pieces as well. Just because we have decided to separate the Treasury and the central bank doesn't mean that that's how it necessarily has to be.
Mm.
And just like I can roll up two different stores into one company to get a set of combined numbers, you can do that with different parts of the government, or you can break it out. I mean, within my own household, I can look at my household as a unit, or I can break out each individual person and look at their income and their expenses independently.
Hmm.
I can even look at my left pocket and my right pocket independently if I choose to.
And your wife is the treasury and you're the
But
Fed.
yeah, but those are all choices, right? And even when we name an account, that's a choice, right? So I'm the one that set up QuickBooks for my company. I could say that my water and electricity were water and electricity, or I could say that they were both utilities and put them in one account, right?
Hmm.
That's just a choice.
Hmm.
It's a choice based on later when I want to retrieve information and I want to tell a story about what happened with those transactions. What is it that I'm interested in seeing? And that's how you choose what your accounts are. So a lot of people think of an account as like a piggy bank. You put stuff into it, you take stuff out of it. But really an account is, it's just a label. It's a descriptor, right? So when we look at the Treasury General account, that's just a label that we've given and we've decided, you know what, we're going to have taxes go into that account, we're going to have spending come out of that account. That's just record keeping. But we could have a Treasury tax account that just tracks tax flow. We could have a Treasury spending account that just tracks expenditures. And those two don't need to be combined together. That's just a choice that somebody made because they wanted to, instead of doing the math to subtract one from the other later, they wanted a running balance of what that difference was. But
Hmm.
that's just a reporting choice, right? So a lot of people get tied up on, yeah, this is the way it is because this is what the accounting says. But that's not a natural state either. That's just some choices that somebody made. And we can keep those choices. We can make different choices. But understanding that they're just choices is kind of what gives us power to see through the fog, kind of remove the veil and figure out exactly what's really happening.
It's you. If you want to change it, you have to understand what it is first.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's what MMT does, is breaks it down. And so they'll say, oh, it's so complicated. Well, we're just reporting on what it is. What it is actually complicated because they choose for it to be complicated. They also choose, they choose to name it that way. They choose to do these things
Now,
because what you said, they're just choosing to, that's just a choice that they made. But it's not just a choice of organization, meaning good faith. It's not just a totally good faith choice. It's also a little bit of a choice of, we can use this to scare people, with debt and deficit and so on. And I wonder how that analogy works its way down to your personal example of, your businesses and your QuickBooks and so on.
yeah, look, it all goes back to what's the story you want to tell,
Oh yeah,
right?
okay.
Right. I mean, at some point, I don't care about this one transaction. At some point, I'm going to want to know what happened, right? At the end of the year, what happened with my company? Where did all my money go? Where did all my income come from? What happened? And that's the reporting piece. And that's what the accounts are set up for. They're to answer those questions. So either you're answering a question that you care about or you're answering a question that you don't care about. And those accounts can change, right? At some point I decided, I don't need to see in a report how much I spend on water and how much I spend on electricity. Let me just dump those into utilities. Right? It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's good enough. And that's just a choice. So yeah, don't get hung up too much on, well, this is what the Treasury statement says. Well, that's because somebody decided to do it that way, for nefarious reasons or not. I tend to think not, but and there are some standards for this stuff. It's not like it's all just made up. So there are some accounting standards for what you put where and how you classify certain things, but there's also a lot of discretion in that too.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for talking. These it's at the stages that we're at. I think especially we're starting to pierce the we're going deeper now. We're aggressively going deeper, and it does get complicated.
Well, hopefully what I said was worthwhile and also correct. If somebody's got corrections, I'm not too proud to accept those. Please send them to me and we can discuss. But I think I've got it for the most part. So.
Well, it seemed to make a lot of sense, and this is specifically a conversation of two people learning together. We're not pretending to be experts, but clearly
yes,
we're on the right.
Never claimed to be the expert by any means. I just have been doing it longer than some people. So.
And we're clearly on the right path. So, Bill, thank you so much for talking. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much for and doing what you're doing. And I actually a completely unrelated MMT, not related to MMT thing on your wall that sort of twisted my brain was the where do the circles intersect post that you have from maybe a few weeks ago, or I don't know, maybe it was a while ago. But I went down your timeline and you have a post of where do the circles intersect.
Oh wow, there's no telling what's on my timeline. I don't delete stuff, so there's maybe a bunch of wrong stuff too if you go back far enough.
Well, anyway, there's a really cool optical illusion where it looks like it's all intersecting circles, but it's actually
I love those things. Yeah.
Yeah. That was I probably spent like a good half hour staring at the thing.
I thought you were talking about a Venn diagram or something that I posted, but
no, an optical illusion.
Okay.
Well, thank you for talking, and I enjoy all your seeing your comments on Facebook and so on and Twitter. So I have definitely learned something from you. So
awesome. Yeah, reach out anytime, and I'm glad we get together.
Yeah, and nice finally to talk with you after all this time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Goodbye, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
All right. See ya. Music for this show is by RecTech. You can find RecTech on SoundCloud and Spotify at WRECK_TECH. To record ActivistMMT, I use the iOS phone app Tape-A-Call Plus for recording phone calls and Zencaster for internet-based recordings. My post-production workflow starts by editing on the iOS app AnyTune Pro Plus, then transferring those timestamps to my Windows desktop. At that point, I crudely process the audio in Audacity and then implement the edits and do all of the final processing in the Reaper digital audio workstation. ActivistMMT is hosted by Libsyn, and the video teasers are created with the online Headliner app. Today is part 2 of my 2-part conversation with 7th-year MMT activist Bill Peeples. Bill and I continue talking about various subjects such as accounting, China, the life cycle of a government's money, and how human decisions are never natural or scientific. A full introduction can be found before part 1, but for now, let's get right back to our conversation.